Well, Chris Manjapra is a professor of history at Tufts University with expertise in the history of colonialism and empire. Well, he joins us from Truro, Massachusetts. Welcome to the programme. What do you make of the pomp and ceremony that we've witnessed so far with the Queen's passing?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I've been struck by the mania in the media over, covering the death of the Queen in this way. Yes, mourning is definitely appropriate when there's someone who passes in a family and someone who's very well known. But in discussing and talking about the glorification of the Queen as we're seeing in her passing, what aren't we talking about? That's kind of the question that I'm left with. Specifically, the violence that has been committed in the name of this Queen really over the course of her whole reign. That's what really worries me, that story is not being told and it's not in the media.
So why is the legacy of imperialism still so important today, then, do you think?
Well, there are many people in our world, in fact, the majority of our world, who understand at a family level and at national levels why imperial violence matters. When we look at how decolonization ended, yes, it ended in the time in which Queen Elizabeth came to the throne it began in the 1950s when she came to the throne. We've been in a period of decolonization from the 1950s onwards, but during the same period, we've seen ongoing injustice. We've seen under the rule of Queen Elizabeth, we've seen the violence and the plunder and the massacres that took place in Malaya, in Yemen, in Aden, in Kenya, the Mau Mau uprising. We've seen underdevelopment that has been made systemic in places like the Caribbean and Africa and even South Asia. And, in my own research, I discovered that it took until 2015 for the British government to, in fact, stop paying its debt that it took out about 180 years ago for slave owner reparations. And this was being carried on again in the name of the Queen. So the past of colonialism continues to live on today. And partly it's because we continue to tell the story of the empire and not appreciate the pain and the suffering and the plunder of those who have been colonized by that empire. That's something that we need to make some space for, I think.
Some people might say that all the atrocities of imperialism were in the past, and so it's time to move forward now, time to move on. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's convenient to think of atrocities as kind of linked to a particular date in the past, and we're able to do that if we don't recognize the way that, in fact, atrocities continue through time. When you look at colonialism, the story is really not about an end followed by a beginning of, a commonwealth or a beginning of the post-colonial era. It really is about injustices that have been papered over, have not been recognized, amends has not been paid, reparation has not been made. And because of that, in fact, this violence has become structural. It determines the international relationship between Britain and its post-colonies, and it determines the national experience of people in the post-colonial world today, the suffering in the post-colonial world. And that has a lot to do with unsolved business. And that also unsolved business is very conveniently being swept under the rug in this kind of, overt display of sadness and mourning. I think of it another way, which is to say, why is it so easy to feel sorrow and to feel mourning for the death of Queen Elizabeth II, but it's so hard to feel remorse for the death and the suffering of millions of people who have suffered in the name of Queen Elizabeth II? I think that's actually a very important question to sit with.
Given what you say, then, where does all this leave the future of the Commonwealth?
Well, back in November 2021, I think we got a clue to that story when Barbados took the step to leave the Commonwealth and to declare its status as a republic. There are 8 remaining Commonwealth nations in the Caribbean. I would imagine that we could expect to see others leaving in the coming years, and I would certainly welcome that as a path towards truth and acknowledgement of the past. But, as we're having this thraldom internationally, really, we're experiencing it in Britain, but I'm here in the United States. We see it all over our media today as a thraldom of concern and sorrow and sadness around the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I'm in many ways wondering, when do we get to talk about the death of the monarchy? And I think that, in fact, would be something to look forward to in this 21st century.
Chris Manjapra, Professor of History at Tufts University. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much.